The words still echoed in the room long after the laughter faded, but for me, they didn't just echo, they settled deep into a place that had already carried too much silence. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, the kind we used to have years ago when life felt lighter and love didn't have conditions attached to it. The table was full, the food was warm, and yet something invisible made the air heavy. My sister had always been the louder one, the one who knew how to turn every conversation into a stage where she could shine, and that night was no different. She glanced at my worn-out shoes and my simple clothes, then smirked in a way that felt sharper than any insult. "Still broke, huh?" she said casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. Before I could respond, my mom laughed, a short, dismissive laugh that cut deeper than my sister's words ever could. It wasn't just the laughter. It was what it represented. It was the years of being overlooked, the countless moments when my efforts went unnoticed, the quiet sacrifices I had made for this very family. I had always believed that love meant patience, that understanding would come with time, but sitting there, watching them laugh at me, I felt something inside me begin to shift. Not anger, not exactly. It was more like a realization that maybe silence wasn't strength anymore. Maybe it was just a cage I had built around myself. I looked around the table, at faces I had known all my life, and wondered how they had become so distant without ever leaving. My sister continued talking, her voice filled with confidence and pride as she spoke about her expensive lifestyle, her branded clothes, her achievements that everyone seemed eager to celebrate. My mom listened with admiration, nodding, smiling, occasionally adding to the praise. No one asked me anything. No one noticed that I hadn't touched my food. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen in the most painful way. I remember the nights I had stayed awake worrying about bills, the days I had skipped meals so my parents wouldn't have to compromise theirs, the opportunities one had let go of so my sister could pursue her dreams without burden. None of those things had ever been mentioned, not even once. I never expected applause, but I thought there would at least be understanding. That night made me realize how wrong I had been. My sister leaned back in her chair, laughing again. "I mean, seriously, how do you even live like that? Don't you get tired of struggling all the time?" Her words were wrapped in humor, but the judgment underneath was impossible to ignore. My mom chuckled again, shaking her head as if my life was some unfortunate but amusing story. And that's when something inside me finally broke free. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my hand on the table. Instead, I simply looked at them, really looked at them, and spoke in a calm, steady tone that surprised even me. "Do you know what it feels like?" I began. "To give everything you have and still be seen as nothing?" The room grew quieter, not completely silent yet, but the laughter stopped. My sister frowned slightly, unsure of where this was going, while my mom looked at me with a mixture of confusion and mild irritation. "I know you think I'm broke," I continued, "but you've never really asked why. You've never cared enough to understand what my life has been like." My hands rested on the table, steady, even though my heart was racing. I didn't choose this struggle for fun. I chose it because someone had to. My mom shifted in her seat, her expression tightening. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice carrying a defensive edge. I met her eyes, something I rarely did in moments like this. "I'm talking about the years I spent making sure this house stayed together. The times I worked double shifts so bills could be paid. The opportunities one gave up so she could study, travel, and build the life you're so proud of." I nodded slightly toward my sister, who now sat completely still, her earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. "I never said anything because I thought love didn't need to be announced," I said softly. "I thought you would see it on your own." My voice didn't shake, but there was a weight in it that filled the room in a way no laughter ever could. "But tonight, when you laughed, it made me realize something. You don't see me at all." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. My sister opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. My mom's eyes softened for a moment, but pride held her back from fully acknowledging what she was beginning to understand. "I'm not broke," I added, my voice steady but firm. "I just spent my wealth differently. I invested it in this family. In you. I paused, letting the words settle. And maybe that was my mistake. I gave everything without ever asking for respect in return. No one spoke. The room, once filled with casual conversation and laughter, now felt like a place of reflection. My sister looked down at her plate, her fingers tracing the edge of her fork absent-mindedly. For the first time, she seemed unsure of herself, as if the mirror I had just held up was showing her something she wasn't ready to face. My mom took a deep breath, her expression shifting from defensiveness to something more vulnerable. "We didn't know," she said quietly, though the words sounded more like an attempt to justify than an apology. I nodded slowly. "That's exactly the point. You never tried to know." The truth didn't need to be louder than that. It hung in the air, undeniable and raw. I stood up from the table, not out of anger, but because I finally understood that staying silent had never been the same as keeping peace. Sometimes, it only allowed misunderstandings to grow unchecked. "I don't need your pity," I said gently. "I just needed you to see me." My eyes softened as I looked at them one last time. "And maybe now you do." I walked away from the table, leaving behind not just the room, but the version of myself that had been too afraid to speak. Each step felt lighter, not because my struggles had disappeared, but because I had finally given my voice the space it deserved. Behind me, the silence remained, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with realization, with questions that would demand answers, with emotions that could no longer be ignored. And in that silence, something began to change. Days passed, and the atmosphere at home shifted in small, almost unnoticeable ways at first. My mom became quieter, more thoughtful. My sister, who once filled every room with her voice, now seemed more aware of the space others occupied. There were no dramatic apologies, no grand gestures, but there were moments, subtle, sincere, that spoke louder than words. One evening, my mom placed a cup of tea beside me without saying anything. It wasn't unusual, but the way she lingered for a second longer than necessary, the way her eyes softened as she looked at me, told me that something inside her had changed. My sister, too, began to ask questions, not out of curiosity, but out of genuine interest. "How was your day?" she would ask, and for the first time, she waited for the answer. Healing didn't happen overnight. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. There were still misunderstandings, still moments when old habits tried to return. But something fundamental had shifted. There was awareness now, and with awareness came the possibility of change. I realized that love isn't just about giving endlessly or enduring quietly. It's about mutual respect, about being seen and valued, about having the courage to speak when silence begins to hurt more than it protects. That night at the dinner table didn't just change how they saw me, it changed how I saw myself. And perhaps that was the most important part of all. Because sometimes the strongest reply isn't the loudest one. It's the one that comes from truth, spoken with calm courage, powerful enough to freeze a room and warm a heart at the same time.